Hello, this is Jake Von Lindy with an overview of our 2022 Enrollment and Demographic Report. This report is separated into two parts, enrollment information and demographic information. It is important information to know for our planning, facilities, staffing, and just knowing who our students are. We'll start off with enrollment. Over these next several slides, I'll be sharing information regarding enrollment. This data comes from our enrollment office and can be different than the data that we provide to the Minnesota Department of Education, as this data is updated more frequently. What you see on this slide is our enrollment trend over time. This data is taken from our October 1st enrollment report, which allows us to compare data over time. You'll notice a drop in students from 2019 to 2020. We attribute this decline to the COVID-19 pandemic and families seeking in-person options. This decline was also consistent with many public schools across the state. We have continued to see smaller declines in our enrollment since that 2020 school year. This slide shows our enrollment by grade level. We saw the biggest decreases in enrollment in kindergarten, grade 1, grade 9, and grade 12 from the previous school year. It is interesting to note that K-12 has higher enrollment than 3 through 6. One reason could be that the enrollment in grade levels 3 through 6 were more impacted by the pandemic over the past few years. We continue to see higher enrollment in secondary grades than elementary, which has been a consistent trend over time. This slide shows our K-6 enrollment data over time. A reminder that the jump from 2012 to 2013 was when Harambe joined our district. Looking at our enrollment trends on this slide, you can see we had a bigger drop between 2019 to 2020, declining 141 students, and continued to see declines in the following years, but with smaller drops in 21 and 22. One thing we are doing this year to increase our kindergarten enrollment is hosting an in-person kindergarten information night in November. The last 2 years, this event has been on Zoom, and a byproduct was it was more of a parent event than a student event. This year it will be in person, and there will be elements that are for parents and elements that are for students. Parents will be invited to attend a district overview and have an opportunity to learn about each of our schools from our elementary school principals. They will learn about our neighborhood schools and our option schools, as well as why they should choose Roseville. The student event will feel more like a party and hopefully generate excitement about coming to school and being a lifelong learner here in Roseville. The event will feature future kindergarten students dancing with their teddy bears and the teddy bear band, meeting a school bus driver with an actual school bus, a graduation photo booth with caps and gowns, and a future graduate of 2036 t-shirt, along with some other fun events. The hope is this event is meaningful and that it showcases what all of our schools have to offer and helps students and families choose Roseville, our theme for this year. This slide shows our 7 through 12 enrollment from 2012 through 2022. You can see there is also declines from 2019 to 2020 and more from 2020 to 21. Again, we equate those to changes with our in-person offerings versus our fully online options over those years. And we had a smaller decline from 2021 to this year. We have also had to close open enrollment to grade 11 as we hit capacity in that grade. This is a look at each elementary school's enrollment. Most schools trended down, but Little Canada is trending up. We think it's fair to attribute some of that growth at Little Canada to the dual language immersion program that is offered. The DLI program will continue to grow, but at a slower pace as enrollment there is closer to reaching capacity. The enrollment at Falcon Heights also went up slightly when looking at the 5-year trend. Harambe is experiencing the lowest enrollment and is trending down. As a response, we have established the Harambe Enrollment Committee. This committee will meet throughout the year, and the goal of the committee is to tell the story of Harambe to increase enrollment at Harambe. As I mentioned before, we also have a district-wide Choose Roseville theme this year. You will see and hear the words Choose Roseville at some point. We each made the decision to choose Roseville. We each have a story. This year, we will showcase those stories to honor those who have chosen Roseville and support future students and families in choosing Roseville as well. This is a look at each secondary school's enrollment. For the most part, enrollment trends are steady. There was a slight decrease at Rams, but when you compare last year to this year, you can see that that trend has slowed. This is a look at our average class sizes for elementary. The far right column shows two numbers. The first number is the average class size for the school year 22-23, and the second number is the average class size for school year 21-22. The numbers at the bottom are the district average for that grade level. The green highlights are for split classes. In the bottom right-hand corner of the table is the overall district class size averages, which are smaller this year when compared to last year. This slide illustrates the average class size for grades 7 and 8. The average from 2021 to 2022 is pretty similar, with a slight increase in class size. The reason there was a slight increase is because we used predictions for staffing. Grades 7 and 8 were under-enrolled during the 21-22 school year, meaning they had a bit more staffing than their enrollment called for. This was adjusted for the 22-23 school year. This slide shows the average class size for grades 9 through 12. As you can see, there was a decrease in class size. This slide shows Roseville class size compared to Metro EXU, which stands for Educational Cooperative Service Unit. Metro EXU is always a year behind, and they didn't do the survey during the 2020-2021 school year due to the different learning models that so many districts had due to the pandemic and the variations in class size between in-person learning, distance learning, and hybrid models. What we notice in this slide is that we are somewhat comparable to other Metro districts, and we haven't lost too much ground with Metro EXU schools in the last 5 years. This slide is the comparison slide for middle level. And finally, for the high school level. Now we're going to transition to our demographic report. As you can see, the demographic report is broken into 4 sections. The data for the demographic report comes from different data than the enrollment report. Again, this allows us to see consistent data over time and make it comparable. We'll start off with race and ethnicity. This slide shows our district enrollment based on the Mars Fall report, and you can see that we are about 61% BIPOC students and about 39% white students. In the next slide, you will see that our BIPOC student population continues to increase, while our white student population continues to decrease. In the 2007-2008 school year, our percent of BIPOC students was 32%, and white students was 68%. This line graph shows our enrollment over time by race and ethnicity. As I stated before, you can see the gap is closing between white students and students of color or BIPOC students enrolled in the district. Our enrollment of white students has continued to decrease, and our enrollment of students of color has continued to increase, reaching its peak in the 2017-2018 school year. As you can see, all of our student categories took a dip in the 2018-2019 school year. This was due to the introduction of the category of multiracial, or 2 or more races, which was pulled from each of our different racial and ethnic student population groups. We are seeing a slight bounce back in our Black, Hispanic, and multiracial student populations, and our Asian student population saw a jump from last school year as well. This slide is difficult to see, but it shows a 20-year trend in our demographics by race and ethnicity. Beginning in school year 2002-2003, white students made up 76.8% of our student population, with 23.2% of our student population being students of color. 20 years later in this school year, white students make up 39.31% of our student population, with 60.69% of our student population being students of color. Our population of students of color has been growing steadily at a rate of 1.87% per year, which continues to make us proud of our racial diversity. Even though, as a district, we are a majority students of color, we still have buildings with majority white student populations. This includes Falcon Heights at 64%, EDW at about 59%, and Parkview right about 51%, so about half. Buildings with the highest population of students of color include Edgerton at 86%, Harambe at 83%, Foz around 80%, and Central Park around 79%. As a side note, Edgerton, Harambe, and Central Park have all been identified as racially identifiable schools by the Achievement and Integration Program because their students of color population has been 20 percentage points higher than the percentage of students of color overall for our district. With our recent increase in our students of color population to 60%, Central Park no longer qualifies as a racially identifiable school and will not be a part of our new Achievement and Integration Plan due later this school year. This slide gives you a view of BIPOC students by building over time. As you can see, the 4 schools previously mentioned, Edgerton, Harambe, Foz, and Central Park, have the highest bars, indicating they have the highest populations of BIPOC students, or students of color. Most of our schools, with only a few exceptions, have experienced a continued increase in their students of color populations over the last 4 years. This table shows you a comparison to surrounding districts when it comes to our population of BIPOC students. We compare the most in total student enrollment to Centennial, Spring Lake Park, White Bear Lake, and Burnsville, Egan Savage. Out of those 4 districts, only Burnsville, Egan Savage has a higher population of students of color than Roseville area schools. We'll now review our English learner demographic information. This slide shows our overall EL trend over the last 13 years. Our student body has been fairly consistent over that time span. As you can see, we saw an overall 1% increase in the total number of enrolled students qualifying for EL services. And currently, 14% of our total enrolled students in our district qualify for EL services. This slide shows our English learner student enrollment by school and by the district overall. This provides a look at how different our EL population is based on the school. Schools with the largest increases include Parkview, Brimhall, Little Canada, and Fairview Alternative High School. This slide shows a longer trend over time. We see the largest decreases in Central Park and Emmett D. Williams over that time span. This slide shows all of our students in the blue outside circle. The yellow circle within shows the number of students that speak another language at home. Currently, we have 91 languages other than English spoken in our students' homes. The circle in the middle shows that even though students may speak another language at home, a smaller portion of them need English learner services at school. This table on the top half of the slide shows the overall top 10 languages other than English and the percent and number of that population in our district. On the bottom half of the slide, we see that the top 10 languages, including the numbers and percent of our students who qualify for EL services. Spanish, Hmong, and Somali are the top languages spoken. This is a list of all the languages that are spoken at home, including the number of students that speak that language. We will transition to special education. This slide shows our trend of special education over time. Our numbers of students qualifying for special education services continues to increase as an overall trend over time. Currently, we are at about 15% of our students. This slide shows the 3-year trend by building of special education students in each building. Ross, Rams, Parkview, Brimhall, and EDW all have center-based programs where some students spend the majority of their day in a special education classroom. This slide shows the primary disability of the students that we currently serve in special education. Our largest areas of service include specific learning disabilities, speech and language services, and autism spectrum disorder, or ASD. We'll now transition over to educational benefits participation. And just a reminder that educational benefits are benefits that students receive if their family income is at or below certain thresholds. This can include free or reduced meals, transportation, athletics, and activities, among other areas. This slide shows the percent of families that qualify for educational benefits. We've been tracking this trend since 2007 and we have seen a continued upward trend since that time. In the last few years, from 2018 to 2019 to this past year, we had seen a downward trend. These years also coincide with the pandemic, which saw fewer completed forms for students who may qualify for educational benefits, as all students were receiving free meals from school. We are no longer provided the funding from the federal government to offer all students free meals, and we believe our numbers for this year have increased because of that change. So you will notice a large jump from the 2021-22 school year to this school year. This slide provides a look at the trend based on our schools. Our district line is in orange along the middle, but you can see that we have many schools that are above and below that line. As you can see, all of our schools have seen an increase in families qualifying for educational benefits. This slide shows the same information as the previous slide, but in a bar graph and only for the last 4 years of data. It's interesting to compare our 2019-2020 data in blue to our current year data in purple, as the middle 2 years were pandemic impacted and show less of an accurate trend. In comparing those 2 years, you will see a less significant increase than when comparing the 21-22 school year to this school year. Thanks so much for listening to the presentation, and I look forward to answering questions that you might have.